If you have not seen my series of letters written to the developers of Last Day on Earth, I would recommend watching them before or after watching this video. In the first letter of that series, which I made last February of this year, I warned Last Day on Earth that by introducing so many pay-to-play concepts into their game, they would end up making less money in the long run. The second letter of that series is the developers' response to my letter, where they acknowledge each point I made in the original letter and what changes they would or would not make. And I made some other interesting videos since then that I would recommend checking out, but about a month ago I had a revelation. When I first joined Last Day on Earth's Facebook page before I was a YouTuber, there was less than 30,000 followers. And I watched their Facebook page grow so fast in those first 7 months that they got up to almost 1 million followers. And then they implemented all those pay-to-play changes and I wrote those letters, and now 6 months later they are still at about 1 million followers. And I already knew that, but I thought that maybe if those pay-to-play changes were making some people spend more money, then they could theoretically be making more money, even though so many people were quitting their game. Which I realize now was dumb, but the uncertainty of it was keeping me from being more bold in those videos. In reality though, now that I've done more research, I can see from public records that Last Day on Earth has in fact been making less money since those changes, going from number 96 in Android's highest grossing apps down to number 139. Now recently, with the introduction of the military pass, they bumped themselves back up to 113. But just like their Facebook group, which still grows gradually, the metric that is important here is not that they are making less, but rather it is how much their growth has slowed down. In the first 7 months, they went from nothing to one of the top 100 highest grossing apps in the world. But now another 7 months later, they're not even on that list. There's something strange about that, right? Not only should they be making more money, but at the rate that they were growing, they should be in like the top 50 or even possibly the top 20 because they were growing so quickly. And it's not like they haven't noticed. Google actually gives game developers an incredible amount of statistics and analytics on how their game is doing, so they can see when an update makes people uninstall the game, they can see when an update causes a new influx of gamers. They have every tool they need to grow their game, and yet they are making less money now than they were back then. And the Last Day on Earth community of players has also told them what changes we do and do not like. My letters were not the only suggestions given to Kafir. I'm part of a team of players that get some of the Last Day on Earth updates early, and several of the members of that team have given similar suggestions to Kafir. So they know they're making less money, and the community has communicated clearly what they think they should change, but they don't make the changes. Now, the most common theory on this is that they aren't making the changes because they are greedy. You hear this a lot on Last Day on Earth forums. Kafir got greedy and ruined the game. Or Kafir will never make that change because they're too greedy. This is the most common explanation I hear for why Kafir won't make the changes we ask for. But now we know that this cannot be true, because when their game stopped growing exponentially to the point that they even started making less money, they didn't make the changes. So they can't be greedy because it is intrinsically impossible for a greedy company to consciously allow themselves to make less money. A greedy company wants money, so they are actually more likely to listen to their players as long as it keeps leading to more growth and more money. But clearly in this situation, not listening has led to less growth and less money. So it can't be greed. Now that we've looked at the numbers, we know without a doubt that Kafir's motivation cannot be greed. Others could push back on this and say that maybe Kafir is making more money when you add up the money they are making from all of their other games. So if you are new and you have not seen the video I made showing Kafir's involvement in other Last Day on Earth clone games, I strongly recommend checking it out. Since that video was released, Kafir has claimed ownership of Grimsoul Survival, and Mishka Production has revealed that they are licensed under Kafir. So all of my predictions in that video were correct, but since that video was made, dozens of other Russian-based survival games have popped up, and I believe that most of them are funded by and licensed by Kafir. If you wonder why I think that, I explained almost all of my reasons in that original video that I made several months ago. So if you were to push back and say that they were making more money through all of those games, I would agree that you're onto something, but it still doesn't explain why they would allow the stunted growth of Last Day on Earth. Personally, I don't think that all of those games could account for the amount of money that Last Day on Earth had the potential of making, but even if those games were able to make enough money to account for it, and for the cost of hiring new developers, a greedy company would still want their flagship game to be doing as well as it could be. Last Day on Earth doing well only brings more people to the genre, which would ultimately be good for those other games. So there has to be something else going on, and as I've thought about it for the last month, I think I know what it is. Last Day on Earth was exploding. It was essentially a new concept in mobile gaming, and it it was making millions and millions of dollars. But because it was a new concept, I think Kafir realized that they might not actually have the best version of the concept they created. So just like PUBG was the first official Battle Royale game, but Fortnite was able to create a version of Battle Royale that became more popular, I think Kafir realized that it was the concept of Last Day on Earth that people loved and not necessarily zombies. And if they continued to let Last Day on Earth grow to the point that they did get into the top 50 or the top 20, then those companies with lots of money would create their versions of the genre and compete with Last Day on Earth before Kafir was ready to compete with those giant companies. Which, if that is what they were thinking, this is really smart, because most big companies nowadays are making huge efforts to get into mobile gaming. Because when they look at the research, they believe that the future of the gaming industry is in mobile gaming. As a 32-year-old gamer, I had trouble believing this at first, but when I looked at the research, I was convinced that they're probably right, especially as phones get better and better. So I think that instead of drawing the attention of the biggest game companies in the world, Kafir started hiring more developers and even hiring other established Russian game companies like Pragmatics to test out different versions of the game genre. And I think they're doing this for four main reasons. First, it allows them to see what genres catch on and which ones don't. You will notice that almost every game chooses a very different theme. We had dinosaurs, then we had medieval fantasy, raft survival, cube survival, etc. I think they're testing it out to see what people are most interested in. Second, it allows them to see what difficulty levels are the most successful. Grimsoul Survival is the most hardcore of the survival games, whereas Westland Survival is pretty easy. If you were one of those people that played Last Day on Earth for a while and didn't get your motorcycle, you should play Westland Survival. In that game, you could theoretically finish your stable in less than 24 hours. In reality, it'll probably take you a few days, but it is at least 30 times easier to get a horse in that game than it is to get a motorcycle in Last Day on Earth. Though the new event that Westland Survival is coming out with in their next update is pretty challenging, the developers of Westland allowed me to get updates earlier so I can show you what they look like. So I definitely recommend checking out that live stream. Regardless, by testing out different difficulty levels, they can see what attracts different players. Third, it allows them to test out a bunch of different events and other game mechanics. I mentioned this in my original video, the different events that the games borrowed from each other, but now we can see a lot more. When Grimsoul created a healing system that balanced attack and defense, all of the other games started implementing it. When Preyday figured out a server system that worked for multiplayer, Last Day on Earth was able to make an exact copy of it. There are already dozens of small examples of this, but I think there will be a lot more. They are using us as beta testers not just for one game, but a whole genre of games. And I think that they will continue to use pay-to-play tactics to suppress Last Day on Earth's progress until they have done enough testing to make sure that when they reach the top, they stay at the top. And lastly, I think they did this to allow themselves time to establish and grow these new versions of the game so that when the big companies do catch on, they will already have dozens of games established with a head start in the competition. So just like I mentioned in my other video, that even though Last Day on Earth had obviously been working on a bear, they ended up giving it to Grimsoul. I think it's for the same reason that they allowed Westland Survival to be the first one to have a horse and Preyday Survival to be the first one with multiplayer. All of these games are given something that Last Day on Earth had already said that they were working on, but then it never showed up. Even though the community said that we were really excited about it, it still never showed up. So my recommendation for you guys is to play along. If they are purposely trying to slow down their momentum and they don't care about making less money, then I don't think we're going to be able to do anything to stop this anyways. So my thought is that we should just play along. Play whatever game is more fun to you, give whatever feedback you want to give, and I would recommend playing whichever game you think will be more fun when they are all finished. For example, I'm kind of a sucker for flaming swords, potions, and magic, so I'm particularly excited about Grimsoul Survival, but all of these games have something about them that makes them awesome. You pick the one that you think is the most fun. So I believe that Last Day on Earth is using pay-to-play tactics to purposely stunt their progress so that they have more time to develop the genre before big-name competitors catch on. But I could be wrong, and I would love to hear your opinions, so if you have a thought on this subject, please leave it in a comment below. But this video does prove that they are not greedy. You can say that you think they're too stubborn to change, or they're arrogant, or they're brilliant, or they're stupid for taking this approach. But unless you can debunk my argument, they are not greedy. So the next time you see someone say that Kafir is greedy in a Last Day on Earth forum, please share this video with them. Also, please remember to like this video if you did in fact like this video. Alright guys, I'll see you next time.